Welcome to Breakthrough Success. I'm your host, Mark Gabberty, the content marketing expert, bringing you 5 new episodes every week where I and top-level guests teach you how to take your business to the next level and achieve your breakthrough. Hello, Breakthrough Success listeners. I just wanted you all to know before the episode actually starts, I've been working a little bit behind the scenes to give you something really special. So a while ago, I wrote my book, Content Marketing Secrets, which helps people create, promote, and optimize their content for growth and revenue. And I just put the finishing touches together to offer that for free to anyone who is interested. So if you want your free copy of Content Marketing Secrets, all you have to do is head over to markgabberty.com/book. Now, let's jump right into the episode. We all have messages that we want to spread, and one of the best ways perhaps to spread those messages is through public speaking. Now, I know some people, they may fear public speaking. We're going to talk a little bit about that during this interview. We're also going to talk for the veterans here, for veterans who, as in like they've been public speaking for a while. How exactly do we get better at spreading our message, incorporating storytelling, all of that fun stuff when we have these public speaking gigs? So we'll tackle a little bit of all of that in this episode. So today's guest is a speaker, speechwriter, speaking coach, and author of What's Your Message? Public Speaking with Twice the Impact Using Half the Effort. He shows leaders how to use vivid messages for greater success. He has developed corporate presentations for dozens of top 100 companies and coached speakers, CEOs, and other presenters to make their messages more powerful. When he is not speaking, coaching, or writing, today's guest consults on message management. Today's guest for episode 258 of the Breakthrough Success Podcast is none other than Cam Barber. Cam, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show.
G'day, Mark. It's great to be here.
Cam, I'm really looking forward to this interview because public speaking is such a powerful way to spread your message, really build your authority, and we're really going to dive into that. But before we do that, I'd like to get a little backstory. So can you tell us a little bit about why you focus on public speaking when it comes to spreading your message and why you help others with that?
Yeah, so they say the teacher teaches what they most needed to learn. So my experience with public speaking, even though I'm a bit of a loudmouth and an extrovert typically, was that I was just rambling and talking rubbish and sort of unable to be focused and wasn't sure why I was there because I didn't get that two-way flow. So if I was chatting to people and there was two-way discussion, I was very comfortable. But once you stand up in front of an audience and they're just staring at you with those big eyes saying, "What do you got? Keep me interested." I didn't know what to do. And so I did a course. I attended a presentation skills training course, and it made me worse. And in a way that changed my life, or it set a direction. Because what I was taught was that I had to follow a whole list of rules to be an effective public speaker. And a lot of it was about body language and voice, and I couldn't just be myself. And the harder I tried to follow those rules, the more self-conscious I became. And you can't think clearly, which is really one of the goals of public speaking. Think clearly, speak clearly. You can't think clearly when you're that self-conscious and you're worried about the gestures. I'll give you an example. We were videotaped in this training, and our ums and ahs were measured, fine. And our number of gestures were measured, and we were told that the optimum number of gestures was 6 per minute. And I was videoed doing 60 per minute. So you have this culture of training, which is basically, let's find out how many mistakes you're making and tell you to stop doing those mistakes. And if you stop making the so-called mistakes, you'll be able to engage an audience. It's a dumb idea, Mark, and it doesn't work. It doesn't really matter what your style is or if you're loud or you gesture a lot. What matters is, are you able to engage your audience? And the best way to do that is to distill key ideas into messages. And that's where it all began. I was a sales manager at a radio network, and I had to present all the time marketing programs to clients. And when I realized that it was about distilling ideas into key messages, I knew what to do, I had purpose, and I became a much better speaker.
And it's interesting how you talked about engaging as the focus, where like you could talk about like style and like very technical things, but at the core, it's how you engage with your audience. And I feel like that's a very important distinction that we need to be making, where it's easier if we just focus on the level of engagement. Then if we really want to fix things like gestures and things like that, we can do that, but we get the engagement down first and continue from there once we have that really strong foundation. And one of the things I do want to ask you is, well, like, how exactly do we become better at public speaking and being able to communicate our messages?
Yeah, so I urge people to think about the world from a messaging point of view. Now, one of the best ways to do this is to be attacked, so to speak, right? This is what I do as a consultant. I attack my clients' messages with pretty much words like, so what? Who cares? So let's say you put an outline together of your speech. Just imagine your audience is saying, so what? Who cares? And that one idea can change you from a boring speaker to a fabulous speaker. I'll give you an example. I did some work with a scientific organization, and these two scientists made a presentation, and they said, we're able to, with this new radar device, identify the depths of the ocean floor from 3 miles down or 2 miles down. It's 5 times more powerful than any other radar system in the past. So I screamed at them, who cares? So what? And of course they were initially, are you kidding? It's never been done. It's 3 times better, 5 times better than before. But who cares that you can radar the floor of the ocean? And then they said, oh, well, that way you can identify the anomalies, and through the anomalies we can find out where the cheap oil is. Aha, you didn't mention that. Because a lot of people are lost in the detail, and this concept of so what, who cares, forces you to answer the detail so the audience will be engaged. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I mean, the fact that it was such a simple approach, like just one question you could ask yourself, it wasn't like a list of different ways. I'm sure there are a lot of ways we get better at public speaking, like practicing and things like that, but just a so what, who cares, it'd be like, that can get us to look a lot deeper into our presentations, into the points that we are making. And I know with public speaking, it's bad to try to memorize the whole thing. For some people, it works for them because they have more of an actor kind of an approach. But although we can't really memorize everything, how do you recommend we go about remembering all of the key points that we want to touch upon within our speeches?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And finding the right balance between notes and memorizing is a personal journey that you want to work out. But in my book is called What's Your Message? And it outlines the basic ideas we've talked about. It gives examples from Steve Jobs to Nelson Mandela and Gandhi, Richard Branson, and so on. What you find is that every successful person who has a profile and a name that we know is great at messaging. They're good at distilling ideas, including Donald Trump. Now, I know most people don't want to hear, or half the world doesn't want to hear that. Whatever problems Donald Trump has, he is excellent at messaging and getting other people to repeat messages. So that's the first step. The second step is what we call the chunk structure. So in the book, I just show you that an outline that's broken into chunks or sections is the best way to memorize or remember the key elements of the speech without having to memorize every word. So, for example, you have the rhythm of the start. So the start goes like this. Here you go. No matter what you're talking about, here is the rhythm of the start of your talk. G'day. Now, you might not say g'day. You might say hello, but I say g'day. G'day. This talk is about. Now, you fill in your title. And we're going to cover, and whatever it is, 2, 3, or 4 areas. We're going to cover how it got there, what we're going to do about it, and finally, the next steps. You got it? And that's gold. There you go. There's 10 grand of consulting for you. If you have that rhythm of the start, You can do something before it, you can do something after it, but you have great certainty about how that works, and it's very easy to remember. Do you want to know how every good presentation or speech should end?
Yes,
Here
definitely.
It is. So it should end with a message. If you've ever sat in business presentations, particularly PowerPoint presentations, most of them don't have an ending, which is one of the biggest mistakes you can make. So you see people with their slides. Hey, there's a slide here. I talk about the slide. I know what I'm talking about. I've got the experience and the subject knowledge. Click. Here's another slide. And I'm talking about what's on the slide, blah, blah, blah. Click. Oh, we're out of slides. So I guess we're done. Any questions? So that's not an ending. That shows that you're uncertain about what you're doing. So the rhythm of the end is, whether you do a sort of a semi-wrap-up or whatever, is, okay, so to wrap up, the key idea is, boom, 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 whatever your message is. So if you know how to start, you know how to end, and then if you just Google chunk structure or speech outline chunk structure, you'll see a whole bunch of examples from Steve Jobs's Stanford speech to a bunch of clients that I've worked with that just show you that you can memorize the key elements, the memorable bits, while bullet pointing and remembering some of the detail.
And I really like you can use notes and not giving yourself too many notes either, but like bullet pointing and the important details. That's pretty important. And also like getting down the start and the finish, because if you have a strong start, then it's easier to transition to the next topic, transition to the next key point. Like the start of anything, like the start of a podcast episode, the start of a speaking engagement, those first 30 seconds to 1 minute, they determine how many people are actually going to stick around and absorb the message. So those parts are really important. They can make the speech a lot easier and flow a lot better. But you could have the skills of public speaking, but if you have that kind of skill, the way to leverage it, the way to release it is to get on stages. So what is your advice for the public speaker who may have this message, who may have a good story or presentation, who wants to get on more stages?
Yeah, great. So the book, What's Your Message, obviously focuses on messaging, but it also focuses on natural style. Now, a lot of people say natural style. What does that mean? Here's what it means. Whatever helps you think clearly and manage your anxiety or nervousness on stage is the right style for you. And even though that might sound very simple, it is the opposite of what most people are taught. Most people are taught you must do these things and you must not do these things. And a lot of the things that, let's say body language, a lot of the things in body language that are negative and turn an audience off occur because you're nervous. So if you find the style, if you find the balance of notes that works for you, and you're comfortable in your own skin and you're thinking clearly, your body language will be fabulous. It might be different to mine, and it might be different to Joe's and Daphne's over there because people are different, but it will look natural and it will flow. So the book, What's Your Message, is also trying to push this idea that you don't have to follow a set of rules. You can decide what you want to do, what makes you comfortable. So how many notes do you want? Do you want notes? You don't have to use PowerPoint if you don't want to. You can if you want to. Do you want to stand? I had one client who's, you can't see this, obviously it's audio, but he said, when I'm comfortable, I've got my legs spread and I've got my hands sort of pushed deep down in my pockets. And I like that. It helps me think. And he said, I wish I could do that on stage. And I said, why not? Oh, no, but aren't you supposed to? No, you do whatever, you do what makes you feel comfortable. So that just gave him the freedom to think, oh, I can walk or not walk. I can stand. I could lean on the lectern. I can do what makes me feel comfortable. So the first thing is give yourself permission to think about what makes you feel comfortable and do it and test it and try it.
And I mean, I really like how we're going back to this personal style because Like in the example you mentioned, your client preferred to have his hands in his pockets, and in some cases, we just have to follow a style that maybe like not everyone's doing. Maybe it would just be us. Maybe it's something where like if you go to someone else, like you hear it's a bad idea, but we do have to embrace our own style, feel more comfortable with who we are as we're delivering our message, because it's a lot harder to deliver our message when we're delivering it in someone else's shoes and someone else's style. So I really like that emphasis on the style that we continue to develop. And I mean, as we do get on stages, like that style becomes more and more important for us to own as our own. And one of the things I want to talk about with public speaking is that some of the speakers use public speaking as a way to sell their products on the stage, and that's how they make their revenue. So I'm wondering if we could talk about how we would go about selling on the stage.
Yeah. Well, it's a tricky balance because if people feel manipulated, they might be resistant to buying. Yet, if you don't tell them what you've got and why it's valuable, they're not going to buy it, and they might miss out on something that's really useful to them. So, if you think that it's coming across as too salesy, often just saying, "I hope this doesn't come across as too salesy, but I'm going to explain what products I've got just in case they're relevant to you." So that's a very powerful principle that you, what I call, you name the elephant in the room. So, or another thing we call it is you may be thinking. So if you're worried that the audience is thinking X, Y, Z, then you say, look, you might be thinking this. I understand that some people might find this too salesy, but I've had a lot of people say, why didn't you explain what you had on stage? So here I am, I'm just going to explain it, take it or leave it. Of course, there are other ways to do it. There are some very structured techniques that I've seen people use on stage, and they can work too. I think you've just got to make sure you walk the line, the balance between a structured approach to selling, and if people think you're using techniques on them, they switch off. It's a fine balance, and you've got to sort of test it out yourself. Let me just run through. There are 5 principles that I outline in the book, What's Your Message? And I think it answers some of the questions we've already talked about. So the first is, all anxiety is caused by uncertainty. This is a wonderful principle, and it obviously guides the natural style approach that we were talking about, and it also guides how hard you want to sell. Because if you are feeling, I really am manipulating these people, or I think they're going to hate it, then that might come across in your voice. So what is the right balance that helps you feel certain about what you're doing?
And I mean, like you talk about that balance, which is, I mean, it'd just be good to mention the offer. That is something that you definitely have to do. But overselling it, I mean, different people have different balances. Part of it depends on the audience, part of it depends on the speaker. But we do have to figure out what that balance is for us. And a lot of that is through practice, and you'll get a better idea as you practice more, you present more, and you see the results you get based on whether the attendees buy the product you have or not. And
actually, that's right. Can I give you another tip there? Sorry to interrupt.
Go for it.
Here's a simpler, shorter, better messaging example. Imagine your audience, after they've finished listening to you speak or heard your podcast, an hour later, chatting to a friend over coffee, and they say, I'm thinking of buying this product because. What's the because line? That's your message. Find the message that is going to be transferred on and that is exciting enough to your audience. That's the power of messaging. You see, even if people are eager to buy something on the spot, but an hour later, a day later, a week later, they can't remember why, or they can't explain it to someone else, that will have less impact. Whereas if you give them that message that they can justify, that sticks in their mind, you're going to go a lot further.
And I really like finishing that because, I mean, that's a very valuable way to figure out like how to frame your messaging, how to sell more on the stage. There are some people who I also want to address, breakthrough success listeners, who they they are public speakers or they want to get on more stages. They feel like something is holding them back. So I'm wondering, what do you believe holds most people back from being able to get on more stages and effectively communicate their message?
Principle number one, uncertainty is the cause of all anxiety. So, and you've got to ask yourself why you're uncertain, but here are some of the most common answers. You've got 100 ideas and you haven't sorted them into the top 5, or you don't know how to structure your talk and it's a mess, and therefore you can't go forward with that uncertainty and that mess in your head. So there are 2 things in this instance that help. One is pull out the key message. Say it out loud. Test it out loud to a wall, to a mirror, to a chair, to a friend, to your audience. Get some certainty about that message. Then structure your ideas in what we call the chunk structure. Again, Google chunk structure or speech outline chunk structure, and you'll find a bunch of visual examples. So let's say you've got 3 sections. So, hey, we're going to talk about, the problem. Secondly, we're going to talk about the options that you could follow. And finally, the recommended solution, or something relatively simple like that. And that will help you sort your ideas, and you'll find that you can get some real certainty, this feeling in your gut and in your mind that I know what I'm there to get across, my message. I've tested it out loud. That helps me have more certainty. And I know how I'm going to do it. I'm going to go through these 3 sections, and I've bullet pointed each section, and there's a key point for each section, and I know how I'm going to end. So most people are held back because they've still got uncertainty in some area, and I'd argue get certainty in your message and structure and also in your natural style. And that gives you confidence. I mean, this is really what happened to me, Mark. I did this course and I became so self-conscious about what I was not allowed to do. I was told never put my hands in my pockets. They didn't tell me why. They just said that was a rule. Stop gesturing so much, blah, blah, blah. And so it took me 6 months to finally do my own research and say, that's just rubbish. That's irrelevant. I'm just going to be myself. And I got gestures flying out all over the place. But that's how I think clearly and get my message across. And once you break the shackles of uncertainty, you have this confidence that just powers you forward. Why wouldn't you want to tell everyone about your great product or your great podcast? Of course you would. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I really like how you mentioned that uncertainty, which is something that we have to tackle first. It's something that, if we tackle that uncertainty, it's easier for us to pursue our goals, and in particular the public speaking goals that we may have for ourselves. So I would take that principle to heart. I would think about what are some of the things I feel uncertain about, and then just figure out how I can change the situation, how I could be a little bit more productive in that area, and what I could do to move forward. So I really like that insight. And one of the things that I want to tackle also is the people who we were just addressing people who are public speakers, who they just want to get on more stages. They want their message to they want to have a bigger impact when they're on stage too. And it's a challenging journey to become a successful public speaker and have the right messaging. So with that in mind, Cam, I wonder if you could share with us one big challenge that you faced in your journey and a powerful lesson you learned during that challenge.
Yeah, well, I think I've already covered it, but I'll go back into it. I was told by the best training course that money could buy that I had to change who I was to be effective. And I can't emphasize enough how damaging that idea is, and that it's still probably the most common idea or the common advice, inverted commas, that people pass on. They pass on that, you should not have this kind of gesture, or you should have this kind of voice. I've coached a number of women who've been taught wrongly that they have to have a deeper voice to have credibility. I spend my time between Australia and the US, and in both countries, the politics is full of people with weird voices. Even in business, Gandhi is a great example that I go through in the book. Gandhi was a funny talking small guy but learnt to speak in messages. And he stopped worrying about, how he should look and how he should stand and so on. And he just started speaking these short, sharp lines. And you've all probably heard a few of them. Be the change you wish to see in the world. Period. I'm finished. This is the other thing too. I learned that people who speak in messages automatically have more credibility because they know when to shut up. Now, that's an aggressive way of saying it, I guess, but they know when to stop. So if you've crafted a list of messages for each of the, say, the benefits of your product or, the attributes or the features, if you've got a list of messages, you can state them and then stop. And again, just to look at what Donald Trump has been doing, particularly in the election, I've got to put a podcast together on that 2016 election, because just the concept of the wall, whether you think it's crazy or not, or whether you think he's lying and he's not going to do it, from a messaging point of view, he stood out. The other candidates for Republican, the leader of the Republican Party, was saying immigration reform, blah, 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 long sentence, long sentence, long sentence. And 3 or 4 of them did that. And then he just said, I'll solve it. I'll build a wall. Now, that's a message. And when you've got a message, when it ends, you sound more credible, even if the underlying facts don't. So learn to speak in messages and learn to stop when you're finished speaking.
And I mean, that's a really great, I see it in the example, how you go really deep into something, but provide it in a more concrete way that people can understand. Now, of course, we're not going to talk the Trump example was good. I know that people are that's a very, you've got people on one side, people on the other. So just appreciating from the business point of view and from that particular example. But
well, let me give you another one. I know, look, I'm nervous about bringing up Trump examples.
I understand.
Here's another one. Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs is the god of messaging to me. And the book has, I think, 4 or 5 examples of Steve Jobs leaving messages in our mind. And that's after I cut out a few examples. And one that most of us know is 1,000 songs in your pocket.
Yeah.
Now, do you know what that is, Mark? I mean, the iPod. So this is a product that was released about 17 years ago. Yet just about any audience around the world that I ask, 70 to 80% will say, I know what that is. Now, some of them think it's the iPhone, but basically in their mind, Steve Jobs has embedded a message that is associated with the product that they can repeat or recall on demand. Now, if you read, again, I've got a podcast on this. So it's called the What's Your Message podcast. Steve Jobs talks about some of his messaging examples. And if you read that Steve Jobs biography, that big white book, what's really interesting about the iPod example is that he had identified the message before they'd named the product. So you don't see leaders of companies doing this. You see them leaving this to an advertising agency. But this is where Steve Jobs was an absolute genius. He said, okay, we're going to build an MP3 player. It's a new idea. We're going to sort of put a huge capacity in it and put some software to it. It's a consumer product now, not a computer. It's our first consumer product. We're not sure what to call it. We're not sure if we should use the iMac, iPod. We're not sure if we're going to do that. So I've got on this piece of paper. On one side of the piece of paper is a list of the 10 naming options we're considering. Tell me what you think. And on the other side of the paper is the message. That won't change. It's 1,000 songs in your pocket. So he knew the message before the product was even named. And if you look at this video on YouTube of the launch of the iPod, if you know that he's pushing that message and you watch his speech, his presentation, you'll see that everything was about pulling it out of the pocket, putting it back in his pocket, 1,000 songs. It was set up in 4 or 5 different ways so that when he finally put the line together, 1,000 songs in your pocket, you'd already heard those components and seen visuals of it. You couldn't miss it. So that might be a better, broader example to use.
Thank you for providing that example on Steve Jobs and 1,000 songs in your pocket. I feel like a lot of people, as you mentioned, know what that means. It's leading to the iPod. And so, I mean, that's the only sentence you really need for that kind of messaging. Like you have the visual element, you have that sentence, you immediately know what the product is right away. And speaking of products, one of the products I like to buy in bulk is books, because I believe that if you read, you are on the way to becoming one of the leaders within your industry. And with that in mind, Cam, I wonder if you could share with us 3 books that you believe will have a positive impact on us.
Yeah, books, just on the concept of books, for $20 or $10, you can just get some amazing content. And there's a lot of crap books out there too, but I wholeheartedly agree, and I've just got way too many on my bookshelves. I'm a big fan of Getting Things Done, which is the productivity book by David Allen. It takes a little bit of time to sort of organize your life around it, but he speaks in messages. And the basic idea is that you shouldn't use your brain to store information. You should use your brain to think creatively. So you need a system to store and sort information. And one of the lines, again, a message he uses is mind like water. So he does jujitsu. And apparently that's one of the lines. Your mind needs to be like water and clear. You're not going to win a jiu-jitsu tournament if you're wondering whether you left the iron on. So Getting Things Done is a great book. One of the earliest books that I loved is First, Break All the Rules. And that's by Marcus Buckingham. He worked for the Gallup organization, and it was a study of, I think, 50,000 managers, and just broke the myth that there's one right way to do things. And it comes back to this concept of natural style, and that probably had a fair influence on me, I guess, in developing natural style from a public speaking point of view. And then the classic, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's another old one, but not all 7 habits are fabulous. But begin with the end in mind is habit number something or other, number 2, I think, which is what you want to do with your speech or presentation. What's the message? The message is the ending. Create that first. Test it out loud. When I do my speeches, Mark, I promise the audience that I'll say test it out loud more than 10 times. And I do. Test your messages out loud. If they're your website messages, if they're an email, or if they're a speech, test them out loud. It gives you a much broader view of whether it's real. And one of the reasons you should do that is what I explain in my book, which is the closeness problem. The closeness problem, sometimes described as confirmation bias, is that the closer you are to your ideas and your information, the harder it is for you to see it objectively, the harder it is for you to see from the perspective of your audience. And testing things out loud goes a long way to seeing it a bit more objectively.
Cam, thanks for sharing with us those great book recommendations. Those will all be in the show notes, marketbuddy.com/E258. You can also go in the show notes, get your free copy of Content Marketing Secrets. Just pay for shipping, marketbuddy.com/book. And my recent book, Podcast Domination, is also available in the show notes as well. And before we wrap up this episode, Cam, I've asked you several questions throughout our time together, but what do you believe is one question that we need to be asking ourselves more often?
That's good. I wish I had some more time to think about it. It's a great question. I think the best one is what I'm saying having the same meaning to the audience that I'm saying it to? So often I see when I'm working with my coaching clients, people think they've said something clearly, but the listeners, the audience hasn't got it. So I'd ask that and just, are they getting what I'm sending?
Cam, thank you for sharing with us that great question, for sharing all of your great insights throughout our time together. If you guys want to learn more about Cam, get his book on public speaking, What's Your Message? That will help you deliver twice the impact with your public speaking using half of the effort. That is available on Amazon as a paperback, Kindle, and audiobook. So that will be in the show notes. But Cam, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to share all of your great insights with us. It was such a pleasure to have you on Breakthrough Success.
Great talking to you, Mark. Thank you.
How does over 100 retweets per day sound to you? My free ebook, 27 Ways to Get More Retweets on Twitter, has you covered. I use the methods within this ebook to get over 10,000 retweets every single quarter. To learn